Imagine saving for years, working double shifts, skipping holidays, eating at home instead of restaurants, watching every single dollar. You do everything right. You research the market, you find the perfect property, you go through the legal process, you sign the papers, you get the keys, you own a home in Australia, one of the most tightly regulated property markets in the entire world. And then one day, completely out of nowhere, a stranger walks up to your front door and tells you the land underneath your house no longer belongs to you. Not because you missed a payment, not because of a court order, not because of any mistake you made, but because someone, somewhere, sold it for $1 single dollar. $1. This is not a movie plot. This is not a hypothetical. This is happening to real homeowners in Australia right now, and the story is so unbelievable, so deeply unsettling, that when it first started making headlines, most people assumed it had to be an exaggeration. It is not an exaggeration. It is one of the most alarming property fraud cases the country has ever seen. And if you own land, if you're thinking about buying land, or if you just believe that the legal system is supposed to protect ordinary people, you need to hear every single detail of this story. Let's go back to the beginning. In Australia, land ownership is recorded through what's called the Torrens title system. This system was introduced in South Australia back in 1858, and it was actually celebrated worldwide as a revolutionary way to simplify and secure land ownership. The core idea was elegant. The government maintains a central register, and whoever is listed on that register is the legal owner. Full stop. No need to trace back hundreds of years of deeds and documents like in older systems. You're on the register, you own it, simple, safe, supposedly airtight. But here's the crack in that airtight system that fraudsters have discovered and are now exploiting in ways that are absolutely devastating real families. Because the Torrens system is so powerful, because it says whoever is on the register is the owner. It also means that if someone can get their name onto that register fraudulently, they can effectively steal your land, and the law in many cases will back them up. Not because the law is corrupt, but because the law was designed to trust the register, and that trust is now being weaponized. Here's how the scam actually works, and pay close attention because the mechanics of it are both brilliant and horrifying. A fraudster identifies a property, often one that is mortgage-free, meaning there's no bank regularly checking in on it, and sometimes one where the owner lives overseas, is elderly, or is otherwise less likely to notice unusual activity quickly. The fraudster then obtains or forges identity documents. With fake ID in hand, they approach a legal conveyancer or sometimes even a legitimate solicitor who doesn't detect the forgery, and they begin the process of transferring the title. The transfer goes through the state land registry. The name on the title changes, and in some of these cases, and this is the part that makes people's jaws drop, the recorded sale price is $1, a single dollar, listed as the transaction price for land that might be worth $500,000, $1 million, or more. Now you might be thinking, surely someone catches that? Surely a $1 sale price on $1 million property sends up every red flag in the system, and you would think so. You would absolutely think so. But the reality is that in several documented cases, the transaction went through without being flagged in time. The digital systems processed it. The paperwork looked legitimate enough. The forged identity passed the checks that were in place at that moment. And by the time the real owner found out, the title had already changed hands. Some victims found out when they tried to refinance, others found out when a new owner showed up demanding access to the property. One of the most gut-wrenching cases involved an elderly woman who had paid off her home decades ago and was notified by a stranger that they were the legal owner and she needed to vacate. She had no mortgage, no disputes, no legal issues whatsoever. She was simply the victim of a sophisticated identity fraud that had slipped through the system. The psychological damage alone, the sheer terror of being told your home, the place you've lived in for 20, 30, 40 years is no longer yours is something that no compensation package can fully address. And here is where the legal landscape becomes genuinely nightmarish for victims, because the Torrens system has what's called the indefeasibility of title principle. This means that once a transfer is registered, it is generally protected. The new registered owner has rights. Courts have, in some historical cases, ruled that even if a transfer was fraudulent, a subsequent innocent purchaser, someone who bought the land not knowing it was stolen, can keep it. The original owner is then left to pursue compensation through a state-run assurance fund, which does exist, but which comes with its own set of hurdles, delays, legal costs, and emotional exhaustion. Now, the states have been responding. New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland, they've all been scrambling to update their systems in the wake of this fraud wave. Identity verification requirements have been tightened. Some states have introduced the option for property owners to place a caveat or a property alert on their title, which means they get notified if anyone attempts to make a change to the ownership record. This is a free service in most states, and if you own property in Australia and you are not using it right now, you should stop this video and go set that up before you do anything else. Seriously. This one step could be the difference between keeping your home and losing it. But even with these improvements, the system still has vulnerabilities. The fraud has not stopped. Investigators say that criminal networks, some of them operating internationally, have recognized Australian land fraud as a high-reward, relatively low-risk enterprise compared to other financial crimes. The returns are enormous. The paper trail can be obscured, and by the time law enforcement gets involved, the money has often moved offshore. There's also a deeply uncomfortable conversation happening in the legal community about the role of conveyancers and solicitors in this chain. The professional bodies have been at pains to say that their members are victims of deception too, that they conduct reasonable identity checks and are being tricked by increasingly sophisticated forgeries. And that's largely true. But critics argue that the standard for reasonable checks needs to be fundamentally rethought in an era where identity documents can be forged with terrifying precision and where the stakes, someone's entire life savings in the form of a family home, are extraordinarily high. What about the victims who don't get their property back? What about the ones who end up in that compensation process? The state assurance funds were designed as a safety net, and in principle, they can cover the market value of the stolen property. But the journey to get there is not simple. Victims have described years of legal battles, mounting legal fees, and the profound psychological toll of fighting a bureaucratic system while simultaneously dealing with the trauma of having their home stolen. Some victims have spoken publicly about the impact on their mental health, their relationships, their ability to work. This is not just a property dispute. For many people, the home they've lost represented their entire financial security, their retirement plan, their children's inheritance. And here's something that doesn't get talked about enough: the particular vulnerability of certain communities. Migrant families who bought property in Australia as their anchor, their proof of belonging, their stability in a new country. Elderly homeowners who paid off their mortgages decades ago and never thought they'd need to be vigilant about someone stealing their title. People living with disability or cognitive decline. People who own investment properties interstate and don't regularly check in. The fraudsters know exactly who to target, and they target systematically. So what does this all mean for the ordinary person? If you own property in Australia or plan to, there are concrete things you need to do. Register for title alerts through your state land registry. It takes about 5 minutes online and it is free. Make sure your identity documents are secure and monitor for signs of identity theft broadly, because land fraud often starts with compromised personal information. If you have a mortgage-free property, consider whether a registered caveat provides additional protection. Talk to a solicitor about your specific situation, and if you're in the process of buying, ensure your conveyancer is doing enhanced due diligence on the seller's identity, not just ticking boxes. At a systemic level, advocates are pushing for national reforms, a unified, stronger identity verification standard across all state land registries, mandatory two-factor authentication for title transfers, longer verification windows that give time for fraud to be detected before transfers are finalized, and better resourcing for the law enforcement teams investigating these crimes. Some legal experts are also calling for a review of the indefeasibility principle itself, arguing that in the modern age, the balance between protecting innocent buyers and protecting innocent original owners needs to be recalibrated. The story of a home bought with years of sacrifice, only to be stripped away by a $1 fraudulent transaction, is not just a news story. It is a warning. It is a signal that the systems we built to protect ordinary people are being tested in ways their designers never anticipated. It is a reminder that in a world where identity can be forged and digital systems can be deceived, vigilance is not optional. It is essential. The people caught up in this fraud did nothing wrong. They followed every rule, dotted every I, crossed every T, and they still lost the most important thing they owned. Don't wait until it happens to you to take this seriously. Set up that alert, make that call, ask that question, because the title on your property is only as safe as the systems protecting it. And right now, those systems need your help too.